Okay, I think it's 12 o'clock. We might as well get underway. Item 1, Sederunt, apologies.
Afternoon. Apologies from Councillor Brodie, who's been substituted by Councillor Maitland, and apologies from Councillor Hislop. And we're missing Councillor Smith.
Haven't heard from him, so he's on his way.
5 present.
Minute of meeting of 2nd September 2016. Yep. Move on to item 4, amendment standing order on scheme of administration delegation to committees. Lorna, anything to add to this one?
This report is really bringing some tidy up. We're obviously conscious of some things between the scheme of delegation to committees, scheme of delegation to officers, and some ensuring that those are consistent with each other and are not duplicated and not repetitive as well for members' consideration, particularly moving into a new council who will be asked to adopt the existing standing orders and schemes at their first meeting. So part of this has been a kind of tidy up exercise, and officers are here, myself and Rona, to answer any questions on what was proposed.
Arthur?
Thanks, Chair. By and large, I have no problems whatsoever with what's been proposed in the appendices, sir, but just an observation in relation to paragraph 3.2.1. In principle, totally supportive of what's being said. A motion to challenge the accuracy of a minute of a meeting shall not be competent unless intimated to the proper officer, etc. But that does not leave us any wriggle room whatsoever. And I wonder, perhaps if you might consider, and I'd be interested, Chair, to hear your views and obviously colleagues' views, perhaps maybe putting in the words, or similar words, other than in exceptional circumstances as determined by the leader of each chair. It gives you a wee bit wriggle room in that basis, whereas there's no discretion, if it's adopted as it's set out in the report. And I always feel it's worthwhile, Chair, having some discretion.
Well, I think that gives us belt and braces. Ian?
Picked up on a few points. That was one of them as well, what else was brought up. I just thought it was too restrictive. Unless it's been a real problem, maybe we need to get a wee bit more background information in regards to why it's there. If it's been a real problem with people bringing up things about the minutes and not having the chance for the officers to have that that information just ready to actually deliver, that's caused a problem in regards to further decision making. I would understand why it's been there, but I just didn't fully understand it. I've got a few other questions, but just on that one particular point that Alistair's bringing up.
Again, that one, and I'll come on to another part on the item, Chair, and it's the whole issue, because as we speak, standing order says that we've got the 48 hours before any decision can be enacted or implemented or whatever, where there's a challenge there. But all the minutes are then draft. Maybe I'm just, asking some of the daft laddie questions, but they're draft until they come back to the full council and or the next committee. So I think the whole issue needs to be tidied up, because if you then are putting restrictions of that you cannot challenge it unless you've given prior notice 2 days before it, then we've got the whole issue, is it a draft minute until it goes back to the full council, you know, and if there is something in there, then as members, then should we not see the draft minute soon after, 3 days after the actual meeting? What I'm suggesting here, I am not putting it, I'm saying that the whole thing needs reviewed, because are we talking about a draft minute? Are we talking about a full minute? Are we talking about, you know, an approving, you know? So there's many different issues in here in terms of a minute. And I know you said at the last meeting very few. There have been a number of minutes that have been challenged of late, you know, when it comes to committees. And we do not get sight of that until either our papers come out for the next meeting or full council. So I think the whole thing needs tidied up in terms of we as members and what is the working minute following a committee meeting or full council in terms of decision making. And I seek guidance on this one, because I'm not sure if we've got this right.
No, I mean, I think this was done to aid officers, but what we've done is opened a big tin of worms here, because at the end of the day, I mean, for instance, the planning committee took place Wednesday, right? The minute was out yesterday. Now, I had to leave the meeting, so I don't know if what was in the whole minute was true. Other committees, you can have a meeting and you don't see the minute for 2 months. So I think what we do is we send this back to officers, and there's got to be an agreed programme for when minutes come out. And obviously when they come out at that stage, that minute hasn't been approved by any committee, neither has it been approved by full council. We do have an anomaly where those committees that meet regularly, say in a monthly or 6 weekly basis, you can quite often have the minute approved by the next committee meeting, and then these approved minutes go to full council. On other occasions, you can have a meeting and the full council occurs before the next full meeting of that committee. So I think I would suggest officers take this away and take a look at A, a challenge on draft minute and how we handle that. B, when our minute's verified, is it the next meeting of that committee, or does full council trump that without the actual service committee having to look at it? So my suggestion would be take this away and take another wee look at it to get some kind of clarity. Quite pick up the points one was making.
Chairman, sorry, can I just come in at your point there? In a minute, obviously the 48-hour rule doesn't apply to planning applications committee, so that's why it's published timiously. And as far as minutes are concerned, because we have the agenda system now, as soon as a minute's been approved by the chief officer, the proper officer, it's published, so it's out there on the internet. It either goes to the next parent committee for approval or the next full council, whichever is the first. So if it's been approved at the committee, it doesn't need to go to full council, it's only for noting. Well, perhaps that's a bit of duplication going on there. So I think once it's published, the opportunity to then say, well, okay, it hasn't been to full council or its parent committee, but you can see the minute and you want to challenge it, it was to get the heads up on that before it goes to the committee or full council. So that was the intention behind it.
What I'm suggesting is every minute should be treated the same. There should not be this great divergence that there is, where some committees are very, very efficient at getting their minutes out, others are very, very tawdry. And I've waited 2 months to see minutes of certain committees. And I think that's the experience of other people. Some committees can produce their minutes, so there needs to be a code there for the officers to operate by. If the meeting is on a Tuesday, the draft minute will be published. Now, what can then happen if it's a case of somebody reads that draft minute and so, wait a minute, I left the meeting after item 3, that doesn't require to go to another committee or full council. If that member phones up, the officer can amend that, because that's no argument with the veracity of the minute. It's when we come to the substance, and that's why this was put in there, in order to allow officers to make sure that the query about the minute, there could be an answer there at full council. So I think there's a set of timescales there that need to be looked at. Ian.
Thanks, Chairman. I agree with what you're saying in regards to we don't want to be too pedantic, bureaucratic over this. We don't want to restrict ourselves to be able to raise certain points, and that's why I asked about the background information in regards to that. But I cross-referenced this particular point. I haven't highlighted it for some reason, but ultimately to me, I thought, does it affect the decision making? Do we have to see a minute agreed from draft and agreed before the decisions can be implemented? That's not the case. So that's really where the sticking point was for me. We haven't got matters arising. That stops us from getting into hours and hours of going through minutes. So I've not really got an issue with the way it is at the moment. other than the fact that I can see it, I know we see them. If it's a real problem, every now and again somebody picks up on something, but we never get any major problems with minutes, I don't think, unless it's at meetings that I'm not at.
Yeah, and you've articulated the very points you're making, Tom. And I think, you know, that there should be a process so that it's back in members' hands. Rather, you know, we get some minutes sometimes within a reasonable time. Other times we're waiting to see the minute. And I could almost say a point in question would be the full council, where there was a social work minute challenged. But, you know, it was only at the committee, the full council that was. And there was time there for another course of action. However, I'm not making an issue of that here. I hope that will be made at the full council in that respect. But, you know, I think it's more along the lines, it's back to members are in control and that we have the minutes timiously within a set time. If we're saying that this is correct, and I'm not suggesting it is, 2 working days prior to the meeting, then equally there should be the same period for minutes to be with. And Claire's already highlighted that in planning terms, you can get that minute out with because the 48-hour rule does not apply. So if we're saying here that 2 days, then equally we should be doing the same at the other end, and that minutes should be with members. So be it the draft minutes until they're approved. So,
what I was going to say is that I think the methodology of a challenge should be clarified, because at the moment we don't. I mean, I remember Willie raising the social work one. We hadn't had a social work committee before full council. I did actually challenge the minute with an officer very early on, and then frankly forgot about it at that stage. So we need to be absolutely clear about the methodology, and also who will see that motion, because the rest of the members are going to have to make a decision. So who's going to see the challenge? Who's going to know that there is a challenge, so that there isn't a row at the committee? It ought to be clear so that people can say, oh yes, I've got my notes, or I remember, or whatever.
I mean, but the way I'm thinking is not only to make it easier for members, but to make it easier for officers. Because if, for instance, we have a meeting on a Tuesday and the minute is then issued to members by a Friday or the following Monday, if a member does have a problem with the minute, they can raise it with the appropriate officer. And it may well be the member has misunderstood. The officer can then say, no, this is what happened. Because if it's been a decision of the committee, then there is a procedure for challenging that. So what we're talking about here is the actual minute off the meeting. Now, if it's pedantic things like I do myself from time to time, like spelling or whatever else, if members are minded, point that out to officers and they can make sure it's okay for the minute when it comes out. But when we're talking about the accuracy of a minute, it may well be that the word not has been missed out, as happens from time to time. So if a member picks that up in the draft minute and informs the officer can then issue a statement. So, by the way, the draft minute that was issued at item 3.1, I've now made sure that is accurate. And it may well stop a lot of needless challenges at full council. So I think, can we maybe remit it back to officers and view the matters that have been raised and see if we can come up with a set pattern. Because it would seem fair to have the same operating system for all committees. Because it is a bit, there's times I go onto the council website looking for something, and one committee I can find, the committee was 10 days ago, I can find the minute. Another one that was a fortnight earlier than that, the minute still hasn't appeared. So I think that's one that we need to have an agreed practice. And that aids officers and members. Everybody knows where they stand. Members happy with that?
As far as I'm concerned, Chair, I seem to be missing something here, because at the end of the day, let's take a service committee minute. It meets once every 2 months. The minute is produced, as it were, the draft minute. Let's get away from the minute. It's a draft minute. As Tilda's Willie says, it's either approved at the subsequent meeting of the service committee or in exceptional circumstances at the meeting of the full council. What that is saying, as far as I'm concerned, is that the only restriction is that, and if any member's right to challenge the accuracy of that minute is that he or she must intimate by motion, as it were, to the proper officer at least 2 working days prior to the meeting at which the minute will be submitted as a correct record, that he or she is not happy with it. Now, I think it doesn't matter, whether the minute comes out, 6 weeks later or a month later or a few days later or whatever. It seems to me what we're talking about here is a mechanism which allows an elected member, as it were, to challenge the veracity of, or the accuracy of a minute. And all that's required is that he or she must give the proper officer, as it were, at the very minimum, 2 days' notice. Now, as I say, Chair, I don't have any problems with that, subject to the proviso as already indicated. I think we should keep a wee bit of discretion so that at the end of the day, if there are exceptional circumstances, the Chair or the leader, should be able to say, right, okay, you didn't get it in within the 2 days for certain good and onerous causes, for want of a better term. And it seems to me on the face of it that we're trying to sort of, to regiment everything here when, quite frankly, in my opinion, I don't think it's necessary.
No, I think what we're trying to do, I take on board what you're saying. You still leave that bit there about if someone wants to challenge at full council, they've got to inform officers 2 days beforehand, because it may well be somebody that wasn't on the committee, but they may have attended the meeting. But one of the things that I've found over the years, that if a minute comes out immediately, like the planning ones, you can read them the next day when it's fresh in your mind. I've picked up 1 or 2 wee mistakes in the past and phoned in, because obviously somebody's doing that right after the meeting. You say, no, you put the wrong word in there, because if you take the word not out, that's what the decision was. Simple things like that. But the longer it goes on and you're a member of a committee and it's been a particularly lengthy meeting, like say for instance social services can be, then you're trying to think, wait a minute, I'm not sure if that's right or not. And then you get into a wee argument with the officers concerned. And I've seen it happen before where elected members have a difference of opinion of what was actually decided at a meeting. It's not where you get a vote, because that's easy when you get a vote. It's actually because all you're recording in a minute is the decision of that committee. Now, sometimes that doesn't quite follow what was in the original recommendation in the report. And if that original recommendation has been amended, this is where you get the challenges from time to time. What I'm suggesting is if there's a set pattern there, where members then can phone up an officer on the draft minute, and if it is a difference of opinion about memory, then that should be perhaps noted. Because there have been occasions at full council where things have been picked, and there was one you picked up in particular, Willie, if I recall, where the minute was inaccurate, right? And it took me 5 or 10 minutes to think back, yes, we'd agreed something that hadn't been recorded in the minute, and that was unanimous, right? But again, that was because you'd picked it up because you'd moved it. But it'd been that long before, I think it was an employment appeals hearing, decision was made, there was also a recommendation came on top of that decision, which the minute taker had not recorded. Now, because it was so long after the meeting, I had to sit there for a wee minute and then, well, he's right, we did agree to do that. So I think there's times when you need to be able to challenge things with a bit of immediacy.
Maybe for our listeners' benefit here, and I can understand where he's coming from in terms of, because this is putting in here at least 2 working days. So that there's a time provision being inserted here. The other one we've got is 7 we must have our papers in standing order 7 working days before. And I say before, because Alistair, you've made the point, I don't know, on many occasions, why do we need to wait the 7 working days to get all the papers? These could come out timorously before the 7 working days. Now, and I'm with you, and I see Jane nodding her head there and saying, there are times when we do forget and we have our memory lapses. And all I'm saying is we should have a date. Planning can work it, they don't work the 48 hours, so they can get the minute out. So what we say is that there should be a period for getting the minute out, following it, so that we can remember, and for that to be looked at as we're looking at this 2 days. That's what I'm at, and I think people are picking up on that. Because there are times when you need a wheelbarrow for all the papers that come through your door. And at times they can't come through your door, they're so large. So you're trying to wade your way through reams and reams and reams of, and you can miss something. So all I'm saying is, if we're looking at in this one, then equally we should be looking at a time period for issuing minutes after the 48-hour period. And that's what I'm hoping that you're saying we take back to look at.
Well, don't, no quibble, Chair, with the principle of that, but let's underestimate, the possible, and I stress possible, difficulties in doing that, because we've stripped out whole rafts of officials, etc., and now, we're compounding that situation by sort of, setting out, or we could be setting out rigid timescales among those that are left, as it were, with a view to complying, with these. Now, I think I saw recently it was the Business Transformation Steering Group. There was a reference made. I think it was they wanted BTB minutes, which simply hadn't been prepared or weren't submitted, and they'd been, that meeting had taken place a significant number of weeks ago. And I thought, well, that's not good administrative practice, and it's not. But, with the same token, I think you've got to be careful that, as I say, at a time of undue pressure on our officials, that we're not, putting yet more constraints or more difficulties in their way and saying, right, okay, you will have these minutes, etc., and they must be done within a certain period of time. All I would say, let's explore it by all means, Chair, but all I would say is that let's counsel caution on it.
Well, I mean, I'm merely putting these suggestions up. It's for officers to take away and look at the time constraints they have. But the one that does stick in my mind is Willie's one, because I think there was only 6 members there at a hearing, and Willie had moved a motion, lost, can't record your sentence thing. But Ken Willie's used to that anyway. But he did raise a very salient point about a certain part of the process. And of course, when the minute came up, Willie quite rightly challenged it here in the full council chamber. And I know officers were sitting there being amused, because I don't think any of the officers who were here had been involved in that meeting. So Willie's there challenging, a minute quite rightly, and I suddenly remembered, he's right enough. The officers were instructed to bring a report on a certain matter, which they did to a subsequent meeting, but that minute had to be amended. And I think that's one of the good reasons for members having to ask officers 2 days in advance if they're going to challenge the accuracy of a minute. Because if there's still a dispute, the officer can then be there and have any other appropriate officers present. We're not in the good old days when it used to be a good day out for every officer in the area when we had a full council meeting, because all the seats round about here were taken up by directors, deputy directors, and their secretaries, and I'm not saying it was the day out, maybe the day of boredom, but never mind. Ian.
I had an issue myself recently, and I went back to the audio recording, and I got clarified more mine beforehand, and that's a real tool we've certainly got in the box at the moment. And I think, that's why I don't think, really, because if we've got a qualms 24 hours beforehand, we can refer to an audio recording at a time and a slot and so on and so forth. So I'm happy to, for the proposal that you've said, let's put this back. Everybody said their piece, and that'll get considered, and it'll come back at some point. See, in regards to 3.3, I've maybe got the wrong, I think maybe we've got a couple of sets of papers. So it refers to standing orders 19, 22, 23 and 24 in there. When I read it, obviously they're not included within the set of papers that I've got. Just can we remind them what they are? I've maybe got the wrong set. And it was 5 point, see in the next 3.4, the very last paragraph being referred to there is 5.11.13. Couldn't find that either. I wonder if that was just 0.3. Have I got the wrong end? Is that what it is? All right, I'll keep you from that. Thanks, Claire. I've got the wrong ones, Chair, so that's fine then. So long as it's there, then I'll take on board what everybody else is saying. But see the 5.11.13 referred to at paragraph 3.4. Is that in the new set of papers?
So the numbering is different, Councillor Crothers. So it's 5.115, 5.116 and 5.11.8. So your new papers, I've got those marked.
Okay, thanks very much for that. As people are asking questions, I'll just have a quick look.
Right.
Again, Chair, on the same one, 3.3, with particular reference to, in the first instance, the appointment of officers under 19 in standing orders. And I've had the discussion with Rona on this one, and I want total clarity on this one, because we're looking at this and it's the appointment of officers, and that's from chief executive officer to heads of services. And that shall be appointed by the council or a subcommittee of that committee. And it's clear here. And I just wonder why we're taking out as standing orders, and I've had the discussion, as I say, with Rona, and then put in the scheme of delegation, you know.
Two different things. That one there, 19, should have been taken out in the last administration, actually, because I think that's when things changed. It used to be the case that the service committee, say it was education, the education committee would appoint the director of education, deputy director, assistant director. I don't think there's anybody below that kind of level. What had happened, I think, what was it, 2010, where the appointments were made by the Employment and Appeals Committee, and all appointments of director and these posts are made by Employment and Appeals Committee, not the service committees. What should have happened when these standing orders were looked at back in 2012, that standing order 19 should have been taken out then. Because all appointments, apart from the chief executive, who's done by full council, all other appointments are done by the Employment and Appeals Committee. So the actual appointments that are made by the committee remain the same, really. There's no change to that. It's just the fact that we've had this 19 in there, which talks about the appropriate committee, when for the last 5 or 6 years it has been Employment and Appeals that's made these appointments. It's not taking any more appointments away from what elected members do for officers to appoint. So there's been no change in the way we operate.
I'm weighing that one, Chair, because it wasn't, and I had this discussion with Ron in terms of it was the employment appeals, the heads of services and different things, you know. And what I was asking Rona was so that we have total clarity that still remains with the members. And you know, I cannot, because I think what Rona, and she'll correct me, I'm sure if I'm wrong, she was saying, we're taking this out and then putting it into the scheme of delegation. It was so that we're clear that it's not putting that into officers' hands. That remains with the members to appoint at that level.
Councillor Scobie, it's page 45, the delegations to Employment Appeals sub 6.2.1. That's always been in the scheme. It's not been effectively taken out of standing orders and put in the scheme. It's always been the delegation.
Could I also reassure you, in the standing orders at 12.2.4, it's very clear it's a non-statutory exclusion that the full council determines the process, and that's the it was an inconsistency in the standing orders, as the chair said.
I mean,
Well, if you're going to adopt the recommendation, as I've already indicated, I don't find anything repugnant in that particular paragraph 3.3. Obviously, you'll have to renumber what's left. You know, that's a minor point that maybe says a lot about my passion for trivia, but never mind. And then I think we should also look at passing, Chair, the fact that 12.1.9 will be deleted. As set out there on page 18. It's not really mentioned in that paragraph 3.3. But just for the sake of total accuracy, you know, I think we should make reference to the fact, Chair, that we're proposing to delete 12.1.9 as well.
thanks for that, Alistair. Anybody else? I'm happy to accept the recommendations as amended. Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah, aye, as amended.
As
sorry,
amended,
Chair.
yes. Sorry. I'll write the minute myself and I'll make sure it can be challenged.
We'll get the minute 2 weeks later.
Just for the record, Chair, Wigan Area Committee, we challenge minutes at every meeting of the committee.
Right, moving on, item 5. Scheme of delegation responsibilities to officers, report by Head of Legal and Democratic Services. Lorna, anything to add?
Yeah, no, nothing particular to add, Chair. Again, pretty much a tidy up of what had been to full council before.
Members? If you recall, when this went to full council in December last year, it was an interim scheme because at that time we're still reassigning officers and deciding which department's going to deal with what. So that seems to have been sorted out now. It's not adding any more duties, if you like, to officers that elected members currently have.
Chair, can I just come in? There was one item I did want members' advice on, and that was at page 97, which was about giving delegation to the Director of Communities in relation to purchasing, about purchases, donations, bequests of art collections, and I wondered whether members wished to place a limit or perhaps on value of that. I know it's probably quite a topical issue, or whether these things should come to members.
I think there should be a limit in that. You know, you watch some of these two types of programs I can't stand in television, Chair: cooking programs and antiques programs. You know, as I say. I'll leave it at that. I think we should be put in a restriction there.
I want us to put a monetary restriction.
I think if you could make a suggestion, then we could take that to full council. That would be good.
So for example, if it's helpful in terms of any exchange of property or sale of property, myself, Paul Clark and Louise as the property manager have a limit of £10,000. So we always report anything above that for member decision, and in some cases we bring that to members as well, even if we feel it's contentious. So that's a figure that we use and we've used for those things. And we still
Members
do.
go about that.
Yeah, Chair, it's just clarification and in terms of that we did bring to the subcommittee here, and that was on the project work that either exceeds the document. It may be in the scheme of delegation. Project work that's ongoing and it should exceed the figure that was agreed. Have we put that in? And my other point is, without compromising my position at this point, is that, and I know Rona's coming, she has advised she's coming back with a report, and that's on the register of consultation. We as consultees, statutory consultees, whether we tighten that up. I don't think it's in this as yet.
No, yeah, I think that the project work one was discussed in contract management review, I think. So I'll check that, and I can pull anything across that needs to be pulled across from that. And in terms of consultation, officers have made good progress, and I think there'll be a report, at least before the end of this council, on a consultation strategy and a consultation register, and I can certainly say that should come under our director's remit to keep that register. If that's
I'm just wondering, whether it should be in scheme of delegation, so there is a tighter, observation of it rather than control.
There is some considerations we'll bring to members about how we deal with plethora of consultations and where they come from, not least governments, but there's also a number of other agencies that seek our views about how members wish to handle that. We'll bring proposals for members, and if they're adopted by members, we would then reflect them in the scheme of delegation. So until we bring that proposal to you.
I quite agree with what Willie's saying on that one, because we had a strange one there recently where BT were wanting to get rid of 112 telephone boxes across Dumfries and Galloway. For whatever reason, it was handled by the planning department, which should never have happened, because all they did was appended it onto a list one of the weekly lists that went out to elected members, and I read these quite faithfully, but it was an appendage to one of the lists. I thought, what's this? And it was about 3 or 4 of my own area, which I took to the various community councils, because none of them had picked it up, and that's why I tried to get a wee bit of publicity going 2 or 3 weeks before the end of consultation, because I suddenly realised there's a whole host of communities out there were not aware. Now, if we're going to be doing consultation, the department committee that deals with that is communities. The planning department, they weren't actually doing any consultation. It landed on their desk, and instead of talking to anybody else about it, they gave it to poor old, what's her name, who's just retired, Laura, right? Well, let the elected members know about this, and appended it on to the weekly notice that went to elected members. And I know for a fact, probably 80% of elected members never picked it up either, because they saw it as an appendage to the usual weekly report. And I know a number of elected members didn't even bother opening the original report, never mind reading any appendix. So I think we need to have the proper committee handling any consultations. And again, we've had other things through SIPL on naming a new school. They didn't go through proper procedures for that. So I think any consultations of any kind should be going to a designated director, designated officers, designated committee. It shouldn't be for committees thinking, oh, we'll go and ask so-and-so. There is agreed procedures for consultation. We should be making sure that we as a council are adhering to them. And it should be enshrined in our operations. Willie?
Absolutely, and there's also standards to be maintained. And I'm not suggesting that the scheme of delegation is about the because we will set a standard under strategy, but we need to see that any consultation, whether to some of the ones that you're referring to, that not only are they properly handled, but also that they meet the standards that we would require this, and that's where it comes in, scheme of delegation.
Yeah, what Rona mentioned there was about us as consultees from other organisations. Quite clearly, Communities Committee and Service Committees have roles in the Council's consultation. So this is about things coming in. I think that was what you were initially referring to, Willie. Yeah.
I hold my hands up. I don't know where I would be looking for this in the scheme of delegation, but what about FOI information? What are the delegations with respect to FOI decisions or not decisions to release? That must be something very specific. I'm sure there's an answer to that. But who has the rights to say, no, that's not going to be released? And where does that sit finally?
Yeah, I mean, it's perhaps not specifically stated as one. It's certainly, I mean, it comes under our directorate, and at the moment, the way that works is a panel that has legal advice, and it includes the head of the unit that deals with FOIs. But I think it is a good point, because we have recently recognised that we should probably have a process that when that panel makes a decision, or if it's a tricky decision, it should be escalated. So I'll certainly take that up and think about where that should be.
That's quite good. Because I follow on to that, I mean, I'm aware there's freedom of information stuff comes in here, and elected members don't seem to get a very good insight into that, apart from we're told there was 20 freedom of information requests this week. Some of it comes from national papers, which is fine, and it's ought to do with statistical stuff. But other things refer to committees and members of committees. Now, I'm quite sure elected members should have an insight into this. I don't like the notion of somebody putting in an FOI for their own reasons, and specifically naming elected members. Is there any sort of input in this?
In terms of the information that's released by the council, any FOI requests we have, that's on our website, so we have to publish that, so it's catalogued there. Perhaps we can make that more visible to members, or at least a regular update about some of that information. The predominance of FOI requests are from media outlets, and we, notwithstanding who asks for the information, we go through those processes. Occasionally we'll have to apply exemptions, and that goes through the panel. We've not had any very tricky ones, and I think that's one of the issues in terms of your point, Jane, which is what happens when we disagree, particularly the Commissioner, and you'll see in other local authorities challenging her view on certain things, and that's something we're very aware of, and Rona's point is to look at that and bring that into the delegations, because Ultimately, the council has to take a decision where we particularly want to challenge the commissioner, if that was to be the case.
Billy?
Yeah, Chair, and I can understand the FOI on an external individual or body seeking FOI. But as a member, we have no need to seek an FOI. And I've brought that to, well, I haven't, but I've asked for that to be brought forward, and it has come to council in terms of the legislation, the 2002 Act. And Alistair will well remember from a different life, you know, the need to know and slips me, the memories go. But anyway, you know, I'm not sure that we need it in the scheme of delegation, because it's still, you know, not, whether it's no percolating through, but still I'm finding resistance to providing members with information, you know, from professional bodies' opinion. And it's no opinion, this is an act of Parliament or regulated by Parliament. And it comes down to council that we should get the information. We are part of the data controlling process, and if we breach that, then we're equally can be hauled before the beak. But it's a right and need to know, and as members we need that in thing now. Whether we need to insert that in the scheme of delegate, we've already had it at full council and agreed. Okay.
Accept the recommendations along with the amendments. Thank you very much. Move on to item 6, which is representation outside bodies. Again, anything you want to add to this one?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this is a real old chestnut, and I know I've had a lot of concerns over the years from members about their taking part in meetings of outside bodies and the liabilities that can bring. There's also an opportunity, I think, before the new council to look at this in a more radical way than we've done in the past, and also to take into account the expense as well to the council of taking part in some bodies, and make choices based on our priorities about what you want to take part in. So anything you'd like to add, I would be grateful for. That this is very much officer thoughts. We have had a discussion with a couple of members who were particularly interested in the topic, and I would value the input of this committee.
Yeah, Chair, from experience, I think in this current administration, I was elected, appointed, call it as you will, to the Stranraer FC committee as the council representative. And it was merely to go along, you know, because they were talking about picking the team and different, no, maybe not to that extent. It used to be that. Anyway, you know, they talked in business and so forth. But when it came up to an issue that's being discussed at the area committee, then I had to leave. And whether you agree or disagree, you know, perhaps that's the individual that's the most knowledge on what's before us. To the point where, you know, I just said, look, this is crazy, so I come off it. And we haven't had a representative to replace since that time, and that's nearly coming on to, will be almost the 4 or 5 year period. And to me, it's a nonsense, you know, that you're there, you've got the most knowledge, yet you're the first one that has to, you know, if business comes up, you've got to declare the interest and leave. And I think we do need, and I'm sure Alistair could speak on this forever and a day, in terms of you've had it at the Standards Committee, because I think we need to have clarity as to not only what the individual being appointed by the council, but is there really a conflict of interest? And if that conflict of interest is there, spell that conflict out so that members are aware.
Well, I think, Chair, that this is it's a first-rate report. It really is good, and I would commend the author unreservedly. It's long overdue, and that's not meant to, you know, to be damning it with faint praise or anything like that. We've got it. been through it with the proverbial fine-tooth comb. As far as I'm concerned, Chair, I have no compunction or hesitation whatsoever in saying we take this forward on the basis suggested. Just one question, Chair, before I get carried away with my eulogy. 3.3, just for the record, the report on 13th November 2014 recommended that link officers produce an annual assurance certificate to confirm that to the Council that, that an outside body is properly constituted and insured. Was that ever done, Chair?
We're not aware that that's been followed through totally. I think there have been a couple of officers who have taken that, but it's never gone anywhere. And again, you know, it was well intentioned, but we need to tighten up that process if it is a necessary part of the process. And I think looking at link officers and their role, or whatever officers now have that role, will also, I think, need to be part of this review.
As I say, it's first rate, Chair. I have no hesitation in commending the report and saying let's take it forward as suggested. I'm sorry Willie's left, because I was really going to say to him that the reason he was never comfortable, you know, as a member of the board of Stranraer Football Club was that he's a covert Queen of the South supporter.
I mean, I think it is a good report, because it's an issue that needs tidied up. But I mean, I agree with Willie. There's occasions where people have to declare an interest and even leave a meeting. And I don't know. I think we need to take another look at that. Never used to be the case. This is something that's happened in the last 10 years. As long as you declared, I'm a council appointee to such and such a body, and there are more and more of these statutory things like the IJB. I think for people in the IJB, you need clarity there. Because it seems awfully stupid that if they're attending a social work committee meeting, they've got the very expertise, they know how the machine operates. And if you're going to exclude them from the meeting, but other members need to know, it's all very well having an officer's report, but at the end of the day, it's far better if elected members are there with their experience, because they're the decision makers. I mean, it's one thing you can attend a community council, you're not taking part in the decision-making process, that's fine. I mean, there's other issues like, I'm on West Trans, and I've got to declare an interest in an intriguing case going up in Aberdeenshire where it's been to the Standards Commissioner and he needs to sort it out, because he's saying that you can't sit on a planning committee and sit in a regional transport body, right? Now, we've been having, I was up on Wednesday having discussions with the Transport Minister and the local government minister about this, because the Commissioner needs to get sorted out. He's totally interpreted things wrongly. He should not be making decisions on where members' conduct and how they handle themselves, but he should be making decisions on, you can't sit on that committee and that committee. Because what we've got to bear in mind down here, we're in a pretty unique position. We've got one local authority, one health board, all the other things like West Trans, arm's length. If there's more of these things get created, we need a bit of clarity. It's different than the other authorities, where authorities have got joint boards for transport, we've got joint boards with one health board. So you could end up having a council in this area where at a full council meeting on a certain item, half the council would have to leave because it impinges on about 3 or 4 different outside bodies all dealing with one issue. So although we'll deal with this is the easy one. I think if we can get a definitive thing where if I'm in West Trans, I mean, that's another daft thing, that I can actually tell the council, it's a weird bit of the law that I can sit at a West Trans meeting, and if the council decide to cut my budget, I can turn and say, I'm not accepting that, you better give me 800,000 quid next year. But obviously, if that comes back to full council, the easy thing to do is you just vote me and the rest of the board off and appoint folk who will carry out the cut. Again, that's because of a badly drafted piece of legislation that didn't think there'd be one board represented by one authority. It was to protect those boards that had representations for a variety of authorities. But no, I think it's an initial bit of work, but I think we need more background here, certainly for the future, if there's more and more of this joint working in arm's length organisations. Because otherwise we'll have one full council meeting a year, appoint people, and then come back for an annual report. You'll not be able to operate any committees. Maybe I'm looking on the black side. Any other points? Okay, can we accept the recommendations? Okay, thank you all for attending. Move on to meeting number